I am cursed. No matter where I go or who I'm with, I will see someone I know. Why? Dumb luck, I suppose. Or perhaps I was cursed. You see, my dad's family lives in New Orleans, a culture which was heavily influenced by Haitian voodoo culture. I'm sure at some point while visiting, I might have accidentally stepped over a dead bird or walked over a line of salt, catching whatever curse was linked to it. When I started to run into people at local places, like malls, restaurants, sports games, I saw it as nothing more than a coincidence. Yet as the frequency and obscurity of these interactions became more and more far-fetched, like in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and Flagstaff, Arizona, it really started to attract my attention. But the weirdest, most far-fetched, unbelievable example that really raised a red flag happened on another continent, in another culture, in Paris, France. I was in Paris with my grandparents. Taking each of their grandkids abroad was one of their dreams, and it was finally my turn. Like every other European adventure that anyone goes through, we dedicated most of our time towards great food and sightseeing. We started our Paris section with the obligatory train ride from London, and we left the train car running towards our next adventures in Paris. We munched on flaky croissants while we paraded through the Louvre on Saturday. On Sunday, like all dedicated Catholics, we went to church. Only this church had slightly more significance compared to our typical Sunday service. It was the famous Notre Dame. The administration of Notre Dame has the management of churchgoers and tourists down to a science, as the majority of the perimeter of the church was surrounded by a line of tourists, waiting to climb the bell tower for the iconic views of Paris. However, despite the long lines to see the views at the top of the church occupied mostly by the tourists, we simply walked into the church as churchgoers. This was a true Parisian equivalent of a Disney Fast Pass. As we walked through the vaulted gates, we were greeted with beautiful reliefs of the 12 apostles and several French saints. Our nose hairs were singed from the overwhelming strength of the frankincense. The walls and ceilings were adorned with beautiful Renaissance-era paintings. All this, with the Gothic architecture, created an atmosphere unlike anything I've ever experienced. Monotone Gregorian chants filled the room with its high ceilings. Since its completion in 1345, the Notre Dame seemed to stay the same, suspended in time. With the start of the church service began the start of familiarity. Regardless of the language of the Mass, Catholic law requires the structure and traditions to stay the same. But despite this overwhelming familiarity, there was one thing that felt too familiar. But the Mass was starting, and I was getting nauseous from the incense, so I began focusing on dealing with those sensory cues instead. Now my older brother, being quite religious, has always stayed quiet during Sunday service at home. So when he nudged me on the shoulder, I knew that there had to be something exciting enough to interrupt his attention. I anticipated him to motion to a tourist, way too underdressed, or a nun with more wrinkles than an accordion. Instead, he leans over and whispers ever so silently as to not gather the attention of the monks deep in prayer. "Brad, that guy, he's kind of looking at you funny." Clueless, I scanned the rows and rows of Catholics in search of this guy. Staring at me from across the room, I noticed not one, but two people. I meet the glare of one of them. His beard and stance resembled my cross-country teammate, Trevor, one I'd run with every day during the season. We had countless memories of exploring the trails and roads near my high school. It was Trevor. In shock, I ignored his presence until the end of the service. Afterwards, I ran up to him and said hello. Our conversation was forgetful. Our short run-in lasted only a few minutes, and as soon as we met, we soon quickly went our separate ways. And almost instinctively, I told everyone that knew him about what just happened. What are the odds I run into someone here, thousands of miles away from my life at home? That, my friends, is just my luck. Or my curse. And as I reported this interaction to my father, he responded in a way only dads respond. The world, as vast and expansive as it is still extensively small. Do your best to not be in a preventable position that could compromise your future, because you can never really know when you're going to run into someone that you have to impress. Now, despite how borderline pretentious this sounds, there's an overwhelming amount of reality within this. And from my experiences with Trevor at the Notre Dame in Paris, I know how real this reality is. You see, it wouldn't be helpful for an interview if my interviewer saw me being a drunken mess the night before at a bar, and even socially. What if I was wearing some gross touristy outfit when I ran into Trevor? He could have taken a picture of me and shared it to my entire high school class. My social life? Dead. Always be the best version of yourself, and anticipate to run into someone when you least expect it. As the world becomes more connected and increasingly easier to travel around, these types of interactions are only going to become more frequent. Be ready. And if you're ever in New Orleans or Paris, make sure to keep an eye out for me, because knowing my dumb luck and my dumb curse, I'll probably run into you.